I'm Scott Al Miller, and this is my everyday life living in Latin America as an immigrant. Today, I have some questions about working in or being able to generate income in Nicaragua, as often comes up. These are a little bit different today, so we're going to touch on those. This is also my final day recording videos from here in Houston, Texas for the year. We are preparing. We're already all packed up. We're going to be heading to the hotel by the airport here in just maybe about 5 hours. We're going to spend the night near the airport because we have to be at the airport at 3 a.m. for our 5 a.m. flight, which is going to be Spirit from Houston Intercontinental Airport over to Orlando in Florida, where we're going to have a very long layover, lots of time to chill and hang out. And then we're going to be flying up to Rochester, New York, where we can't drive ourselves to my dad's house because we couldn't get driver's licenses. So we have all that challenge of getting driven around everywhere now when we had been planning on driving ourselves everywhere. So our trip to New York just got way more complicated, and I'm not able to go out and show a whole bunch of New York while we're there the way that I had hoped and planned for you guys. So lots of changing plans, but we're going to get to today's questions after the bump. First up, we have a simple question from a day trader who is looking at moving to Nicaragua and wants to continue doing the trading that he's always done from Nicaragua. Of course, this is an absolutely fantastic way to go. If you're doing some kind of career like that, where you're trading online and you have the flexibility to do it from wherever you like, then moving to a low-cost location like Nicaragua simply either gives you more spending power to use whatever earnings you're making for your trading, but that also means you have more power for investing and making more trades, which then turn into more money, assuming you're doing a good job as a trader. So lots of people who do this kind of thing should be looking, if they're wise traders, they should be looking at places like Nicaragua, because it's part of not just a potential life improvement, but it's also part of your good trading strategy. It's part of the whole that goes into generating the investment income for that. So his questions are obviously going to be around, do you have good internet? Do you have good cell phones? And how do you get texts from banks or other institutions who need to, for example, send you a two-factor verification code or a password reset or something like that? These are common things that if you were to lose access to them would be pretty impactful. So what do we do? So internet access. We talk about this a lot. Internet access in Nicaragua is fantastic. Of course, if you want to live on a rural farm in the middle of the jungle, your mileage could be pretty bad. But if you're looking at any kind of civilized area, any kind of built up city, even really small ones, most small villages, even really rural areas, you can get not just decent internet, but really high speed, high quality, high reliability fiber internet. So your options for something like trading, extremely good, better than the average in the US, in fact. But just like the US, you can't go absolutely anywhere, do absolutely nowhere is perfect, right? Maybe Romania, Singapore, places like that, you really never have to think about it. But in Nicaragua, even though we're one of the best, maybe the best on average in the Western Hemisphere, you do need to be a little bit conscientious and say, wow, okay, so this farm on top of a hill that's not connected to anything. No, if you're off grid, you're off grid. I know people who live on islands and are connected only by wireless, and they've only got, solar panels on their roofs for power. And when the sun goes down, they have nothing but their batteries. No, those kind of places are going to be terrible for trading. But León, Chinandega, Matagalpa, Esteli, Jinotega, Boaco, Huigalpa, Jinotepe, Diriamba, Managua, obviously, Masaya, Granada, San Juan del Sur, even Rivas, I'm sure Bluefields, Bilwi, all those kinds of Acatal. All those kinds of places, any of them or their surrounding support cities, right? They're all going to be absolutely fine. I know people in tiny little villages, they have high-speed internet. The thing that you're going to want to check on is making sure that you have access to Teco fiber, or in some cases, Claro fiber. You're not going to want to be on the lesser connections. So if you're renting, you need to make sure that your rental is going to either have good internet or allow you to bring your own. But check with the providers, make sure you're able to get what you want at the place. We use Teco, great experience. I was talking to TJ. He uses now Claro fiber. He's great experiences with that. There's lots of good options, but you just want to make sure before you check, but same as anywhere. But your chances of having to worry about it extremely low. Cell phone coverage, again, generally better than the US. I'm going to be doing a surprises in the US, but one of the things I'm surprised by here is how little coverage there's been even in the Houston metro area. And one of the reasons that I switched carriers when living in Dallas, there was poor coverage when living in Dallas. That was some time ago. In Nicaragua, of course, again, rural areas, you're going to have some drops in coverage, but in general, really good cell phone coverage. So any place you're going to rent, just go out and check with your cell phone, and chances are you're going to be like, yep, this is fantastic. That took 2 seconds to check. And then you'll be 100% sure that you have good coverage. Now, as always, for all travelers, it doesn't matter where you're going. If you're an American and you want to do anything in the world, you need to be on T-Mobile. Period. End of story. Not a prepay service, not AT&T, not Verizon. Never get a phone that's locked to your carrier. There are basic how-tos of good cell phone usage as an American. I assume that's where he's coming from. Make sure you have T-Mobile. If you have T-Mobile, you have to do absolutely nothing, and do not do anything. If you try to do something, if you do not follow my directions, you could easily lose your coverage. If you just do nothing, just have a normal T-Mobile plan and keep it when you come to Nicaragua, all is well every time. Never heard of anyone having a problem. But if you call T-Mobile and create problems, yes, you may have a problem because you triggered something with some misunderstanding, right? Have T-Mobile. Of course, when you're living in Nicaragua, once you're going to be there more than, say, a few months, you definitely want to have a Nicaragua number. If for no other reason than then you can use Pedidos Ya to have some food delivered. And that's pretty handy, right? But it's good to have a local number. It's good to have local service, either Tigo or Claro. I had Tigo. I've switched to Claro. Both are pretty good. I am finding Claro a little bit better, but it uses the same towers as T-Mobile, so generally you're going to want Tigo, but I do find Claro to be faster. So if you're going to have Teco at home, then whatever, like you can figure that out, but been very happy with both. Really good coverage everywhere. Cost is phenomenally low. Just get prepay on that, but keep your T-Mobile from the US. And then if you need a backup, or if you're traveling abroad, like you're going to Costa Rica or something, your service never drops. You're good to go. If you're going to be getting a text or anything from the United States, you're still on your US plan. It's the same as every day, right? If you go on vacation, you should still be getting text. You shouldn't be losing access to that. Now, people who opt for no coverage by going with Verizon or AT&T, yes, they have complicated phone issues that they have to solve, either by paying a fortune or coming up with some kind of workaround. But if you're on T-Mobile, you can go basically anywhere in the world and always have access to your texting. And as long as you're on Wi-Fi anywhere, now all the carriers should work as long as you're on Wi-Fi. So assuming your Wi-Fi at the house is good, you're just hooked up like you're in the United States. It can't tell you're not in the United States. So you're completely handled. But if you need to go onto the wireless network, just make sure you have T-Mobile and everything is smooth as silk. You're all set to go. So if you need to text or receive a text, it's going to work exactly the same as if you're in the US. You don't have to think about a thing. That's how simple it is. Now, you can have multiple SIM cards on your phone. So you can have a single phone that has that American number and American texting along with Nicaraguan services. So you get that local internet. That's the way I go once you're going to be there for any amount of time. So hopefully that answers it. But the answer is all those things really simple. And as long as you don't do anything weird, you're going to naturally, just by having good, normal processes, the same as you would have in the US for selecting an ISP, you're going to be all set. The same, you don't rent a place without knowing exactly what internet comes with or is available there. And you always get T-Mobile no matter what you're doing in the US because it's the only American carrier that empowers the entire world. Those are just normal things that Americans need to know on how to be an American. Keep that knowledge into Nicaragua and you're covered. Our second part comes from someone who sent me a private message, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the question was basically around employment or labor arbitrage, which people don't tend to know that term. It's a major thing in the third world or areas that the United States deems to be the third world, lower income countries, where it's useful to have contracts in the United States and service the work out of lower cost regions by taking advantage of the differentials in cost of living and cost of employment. This is called labor arbitrage. And it's an incredibly standard thing. It's just a normal part of business, and every business decision should be appropriately. And if you're an investor in a business and you can't get answers as to how they've determined labor arbitrage, they're ripping you off. So if you're ever investing in anything, right, whether it's a public company or it's your own business, everything should have this decision. And sometimes people say you can't do arbitrage because they have to be local. There's no such thing as arbitrage in this situation. Great. Doesn't always exist, but it exists way more often than people take advantage of because people are funneling money somewhere that they want it to go and they don't want to take advantage of the arbitrage because it's not their profits, right? So just be aware that that's a thing. Everybody who's doing any kind of business, arbitrage should always be a part of that business. It's basic business functionality. So it should always be there. So this isn't a discovering something fringe. And that's often what people react like because so many US companies or anywhere, right? Western European companies, Canadian companies are often so corrupt and they're using their position within a public company to funnel money to places for personal favors or just go where they like to employ instead of what's profitable for the company. People are not necessarily aware of just how broad and normal arbitrage is. But it is absolutely a part of every business decision. Either it's being intentionally ignored, or someone is not doing the job that they're supposed to do, they're completely incompetent, or they're considering it, doesn't mean they're using it, but considering it in every decision. So what does arbitrage work like? Well, you have, you need a receptionist at a place just to answer the phones at a company in the US, and they're going to cost $50,000 a year in the US, and you can hire someone to do the job just as well somewhere else, and they may cost $25,000, right? Half the cost. You could save $25,000 without losing any functionality whatsoever, taking on no additional risk. There's always risk, but they're the same, right? Why would you spend an extra $25,000 just to, well, literally just to spend it, right? Well, you shouldn't as a business. That's not something you want to do. Your goal is profits. That's what makes you a business, right? The moment profits aren't your goal, you're not a business, right? You can still be registered as a business. You can function as a business, but you're not a business, right? You're just a hobby that's funneling money around, hopefully legally. But if you have public investors, not legally, right? So that's what arbitrage is in a nutshell. Very, very simple. Finding the place where you can charge the most for your services and charge or pay the least for your labor. That doesn't mean ripping people off. It just, people have different market values in different places, and leveraging that. You can still be a very high paying, very good employer in those places. And of course, you can have soft benefits as well instead of just salary. And in other regions, a lot of people prefer those things. A little bit of flexibility on hours, or shorter working days, or, more flexible lunch times, or better vacation policies, or better healthcare options. Those kinds of things are often more valuable than a strict salary and cost less for you to provide. So those are types of arbitrage items as well that are often overlooked, but often not as well. Okay, so in the particular question we were talking about, someone was looking at coming to Nicaragua, and they understood the discussions that we've had, that as a expat or immigrant, depending on your situation, coming to Nicaragua, you really don't have the option to work in Nicaragua, which is absolutely correct. It's really not a thing. It's theoretically possible in extreme circumstances, but it never is plausible in a functional way. I've never met a person for whom that would be a meaningfully useful thing. The way that you have to invest and be your own employer and all kinds of things in order to actually work legally in Nicaragua makes it that you could never do it for the reasons that people are looking for, right? So in an effective manner, there's no way to work in Nicaragua as an employee. So he said, well, it seems like as an expat, and this is where the mistake comes in the thinking, the way to make money is through arbitrage. This is a bad way of thinking. Arbitrage exists for companies regardless of the status of the employer or the people working at the employer. If you're a U.S. company and you want to take advantage of Nicaragua labor, it does not require or in any way directly benefit from there being an expat living in Nicaragua. That sure, you could have an expat that's in Nicaragua that's doing something with that business, but they would have to be paid out of the U.S. and they would still be an American and they'd still be subject to all the American costs. So they would not be particularly gaining all the advantages that you're expecting because you're not using full arbitrage, but you can send someone like that's legal. It's just not necessarily a part of that process, or at least not in the way that you're thinking. But the idea that you're going to be an expat and therefore labor arbitrage is something you want to use as a mechanism doesn't really make sense. Either you already are using it because it's something that makes sense for you, or by being an expat, it's not going to change anything, so it won't become useful to you. Now, some of the questions around how this works. Often the ideas of what exactly employment is catches people off guard because the English term employment, as we say, I'm an employee or I work somewhere, does not always line up with the legal definition of what an employee is. And so it's important to keep these things separate. When we're worried about what you're allowed to do, it's the legal definition. So the way that employment works is that it is an intranational concept, much like residency that we talk about in other things. When you're employing someone, they have to be, under any normal circumstance, they have to be part of your country. So an American company can hire an American employee and have an employment agreement where they're legally an employee. And that does all the things you expect with employment. You can also have circumstances where an American company can hire someone that acts much like an employee, but not exactly, and be a contractor. A lot of people are confused about this, even without worrying about any additional countries or jurisdictions, just American companies hiring people. We call them 1099 contractors. A lot of people think you can just do that. You cannot cannot. It is a much more complicated process than that. There's a lot of different factors that go into that, and there's duck law and all kinds of things, which I'm not here to give you a full legal lesson on employment definitions in the United States. But the idea that you can get around employment between American companies and American workers simply by claiming it's a contract does not actually exist. That is a violation of employment law under many circumstances. Not all, check with your lawyer, but it is not the simple process that people imagine it to be. But there's also the concept of hiring companies. Now, where the contractor thing gets complicated is that when you hire someone as a contractor, you're pretending that they're a company. And if you treat them truly like an outside company, then generally you have no problem. But what happens most of the time is people hire them through a hiring a company mechanism, a contract, and then treat them as an employee. And that's where you run into problems. Now, a U.S. company can always hire another U.S. company to do work. For example, you're a dentist office and you want to hire an IT company to support your computers. There's no problem with that. You never have to wonder, am I allowed to hire this company to work? No, of course you can, right? Super straightforward. And you don't worry about, are they American? They're just a company. They give you a tax ID and you hire them and you pay them, and that's all there is to it. And you can also hire, and people do this every day, and they often are not even aware because it's so simple and transparent. You can hire foreign companies to do work for you, hiring a British company or a Canadian company or a Mexican company or a South African company to do IT work for you. Completely straightforward and simple. As one company hiring another company, you never have to worry about what country they're coming from unless you're like funneling money to a embargoed country, right? You can't hire someone that's specifically against the law because of, some kind of military arrangement or something. But beyond that, you have, complete any Canadian company, any Mexican company, right? As an American, you can just hire, period, no questions asked. It's that simple. And you use the same basic paperwork to pay them, and you don't have to do anything weird. No one considers it strange. This is not a advanced level, thing that like normal people, even non-businesses, hire foreigners to do work all the time through foreign businesses because it's just how the world works, right? We can't possibly not do business with companies that we haven't proven exist and are registered in the U.S. No one checks those things because you don't have to, right? That's never a thing you have to do. So that is just real basic business. Now, when we talk about hiring people overseas, we say, well, I want to get an employee overseas. So let's say a U.S. company wants to hire an employee in, we'll just say Colombia, super common scenario. And you say, well, I want to hire an employee there. Well, you can't actually hire an employee there because a Colombian is not an American, so they can't work for an American company as an employee. Like, the concept doesn't exist. There's no such thing as American employment in Colombia, and there's no way to be a Colombian employee in the U.S. It's not 100% true. There is a way that a Colombian can register as an American employee and pay U.S. taxes. They'll also have to pay Colombian taxes. Like, they would screw themselves, but legally there is a way to become a foreign existing American employee if for some reason you just really desire paying extra taxes. And there are fringe situations where you would want to pay those taxes, but it's extremely fringe. But the idea that you can hire someone as an employee overseas is nonsensical because the concept of an employee does not extend that way, and there's no reason you would want them to be that way. So what do? So we hire them through what we are called contractor relationships, the same as hiring a contractor inside the U.S. So you want to hire someone that's not an employee, and it could be an individual person presenting as a business, or and the U.S. recognizes individual people as businesses. That's an important part of how American business law works. Every person is a business. Business is a universal, generic encapsulation of any existing entity or potentially existing entity. It could be an individual person is a one-person business. Even if they haven't registered as a business, they're a sole proprietorship. Even if they're not doing business under a different name with no DBA, they're just using their own name, they themselves are using their own name as the name of their one-person business. That's a sole proprietorship that is unlimited liability. There are better forms of business that are limited liability. There's other forms where you get to have a different name without filing a DBA and all kinds of things, but those are advanced. Those are probably better ideas, but there's nothing requiring you to do that. Every single human in the United States automatically has the complete and utter legal right to act as a business under their own name and identity and using their own social security number as their tax ID number. Completely legal, completely normal, done every day. And people don't often think about it in that abstract context, but that is how the law works. That's how the tax system works. That's how the incorporation system works. Everything's designed around that. And that universally ubiquitous, uniform the three U's, means of presenting any possible entity as a business gives you this really powerful, simple, streamlined means of providing for taxation and legal oversight and registration and so forth. There's no complications with that. The U.S. really has this ironed out, and it's one of the reasons that the United States is so powerful as a business location, is because things like this that maybe for foreigners seem a bit complex or different, but once you're used to it, understanding many of these mechanisms, there's going to be exceptions that are complex or expensive, but the majority of these American mechanisms are incredibly fluid and powerful and standard, and they allow for really complex organizations of businesses in powerful ways. So this is one of those areas where the U.S. really shines and makes so much sense. Now, what if you want to hire someone from abroad? Well, any person abroad can act as a contractor to a U.S. company in exactly the same way. The only difference, this is worth noting, is that inside the United States, we use a 1099 form that most people who've worked as adults have probably either worked as, encountered in some way, or have heard about people using. Most people have heard of it. We refer to people working under contracts as 1099 employees sometimes, or sometimes 1099 contractors, or sometimes just 1099ers. That form is so important and well known. When you're hiring someone overseas and you want to send money to them, you're going to need to treat them basically exactly the same as that 1099 employee. However, the form you need to have them fill out for you is a slightly different one, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's very easy to look up, and it's just a standard form in the same way, and you get to treat them exactly the same way, and it's so easy, so straightforward, and they are just acting as an independent business. Now, of course, if you want to hire a business somewhere that's doing the same thing, of course it works just the same as well. If that person and 10 of their friends get together and they form a company that provides the services you want rather than an individual person doing it, you just pay that business. I think you use the same form. I'm not 100% sure on the form used for the, it's just demonstrating why money is moving on a regular basis to an external entity. Very, very straightforward. Basically, it identifies the entity. So when the United States looks at the numbers moving around, they can talk to foreign governments and say, this amount of money went from here to here. This is why. Does that match the records on your end? Anything fishy, and so forth. Very straightforward. Doesn't cause any problems, and it doesn't imply anything about taxation. That's a completely separate thing. This is purely an identifying the flow of money mechanism that you have to do. Because, of course, you don't have employment taxes for external businesses. You don't even have employment taxes for internal businesses. So it's very straightforward. And you'll notice in all of this, having someone be an expat in another country offers nothing to do with the process. That's just really important to understand, that by being an expat in Colombia in this example, and knowing that next door is a person who's doing work for an American company, or a business of many people is doing work for an American company, gains you nothing unless you just want a specific person from the U.S. to be there and look over their shoulders or something. That's kind of useful, but it's outside the scope of the discussion of actually doing the process or what you're allowed to or not allowed to do. So if you're looking at being an expat and then looking at arbitrage opportunities, really, in essence, you're after the point of already having done that. If arbitrage is something that's going to be beneficial to you, it's something that should be being done immediately today, and not something you can do in the future. If you are looking at providing arbitrage to other companies as an arbitrage service, you can do that, but again, being in the country does not necessarily add to that process. That is not how you generally would do it, and it is important to note, just from a general advisement thing, that it does seem this is one of those things that as foreigners start to look at places like Nicaragua, they often believe that they're discovering something that people don't know about, when in reality, the country is completely driving its economy through these kinds of companies. Arbitrage companies are the primary drivers of the economy today. Every company you can imagine is down here and in other countries like this doing this, have been doing it for a long time, and the market in the United States and Canada is completely flooded with companies trying to convince other businesses to take advantage of this. There is no company that has not been beaten over the head with these opportunities. Anyone who is willing to do it is already doing it. Anyone who's not willing to do it has already been informed about it and turned it down. So while maybe you know someone, you can talk over that final line and be like, look, you really got to give this a try. All of this is just words you've heard before. Things like outsourcing, nearshoring, and offshoring are different aspects of this general concept. These are things that have been going on for a long time. You've heard globalization. This is what they're referring to, and so forth. It's also referring to a few other things, global supply chains and different countries with different technical skills. My own company does arbitrage all around Latin America, and we hire different roles in different regions because there are different educational strengths and trends towards which tools and skill sets are available in different places. So those are things that come into play, not just cost of labor, but the ideas of these things are really well known in business, and it's not something that you're discovering new. So it's related to that thing that happens when expats move into a new country or visiting a new country and thinking about being expats. Almost everyone has the same thought. Ooh, I went to the beach. You know what they need? Margaritas and tacos on the beach, right? Oh, that would be the best thing ever. But every single expat comes up with that same idea, and it's there's no way to ever make money at it because there's always another expat willing to come in and lose money doing the same thing over and over again. And if you have an unlimited number of people willing to lose money just to say that they have a bar that sells tacos on the beach, there's no way to ever run it as a business. You'll never compete with the people willing to lose money. Now, in arbitrage, you're not likely to find people who are willing to lose money to do it, although there are the occasional people who do it just to create employment. You are up against a massive world of large players and experienced players who've been doing this for decades, and you're also up against a lot of local companies that don't have the overhead or complications of being foreigners, same as general business rules that we mention all the time, and you're also, unfortunately, up against a number of companies that are willing to cut corners and do very illegal things. I know people personally who've worked for companies for a long time and had them steal their salaries and then skip country and move to another country and do the same thing there and get away simply because they managed to get onto a plane before anyone caught them. Until someone reports them for not paying their salaries, it's very hard for the government to know they shouldn't let them on a plane because they're traveling normally, and then they go off and hire someone new to take over your job in a new country and keep them going for a while without paying them. They can make a lot of profit before they have to skip country again, and you start building up a lot of wealth. It's a very, very difficult thing to catch someone at. So you're up against companies that are willing to do some pretty unethical things, and they sell their services really, really cheaply into the U.S. And unless you can go after them legally in the U.S. for using U.S. contracts to commit crimes in other countries, you are pretty much out of luck in dealing with them. So all things that are very difficult about entering this market. So if you own the company that's going to be leveraging this arbitrage, you should already be leveraging the arbitrage. If you don't, then you're looking at becoming a company that has to sell that arbitrage, and you're up against one of the biggest, most oversaturated markets that you could possibly imagine. So imagine how difficult that would be. All things to consider before you put that under your hat as a thing that you want to potentially approach doing. I'm not saying you shouldn't try it, by all means, if you have a reason that it makes sense, but if you're coming to it with this spirit of, I just discovered this new thing, it's got to be the hot item that people haven't discovered, that is anything but the truth. Everybody is aware of it. Every business is just tired of hearing about the opportunities that they're throwing away. They know that they're not taking advantage of their opportunities. They know they can make more profits and are just choosing not to. In many cases, they're getting government kickbacks. I don't know how often this happens, but I've definitely worked for companies where we had too many staff. And when I said, we could make so much more profits if we didn't have all these unneeded people who are not adding to our labor pool. And I said, well, yeah, except what you don't see is that the government pays us for every person we hire. We're not making money off of the product we sell. We make money off the taxpayers. We're functioning as a way to hide welfare rolls from the taxpayers so that they don't know where the government's money is going. It was literally a money laundering scheme to hide the government's expenditures from the taxpayers. And I don't know how common that is, but it's common enough that I've worked for major Fortune 100s that was how they ran their businesses. So be aware that those kinds of things will affect tons of companies you talk to, and other things that will affect companies you want to talk to are, the people that you're going to, sell to arbitrage. Well, my cousin does that job, or my friend's business does that job. And if I do that, they're going to lose all that income. And they're not going to give me any kickbacks, or my friends aren't going to get those advantages. So it's important to understand why a lot of businesses don't move in this direction, and some are just unwilling to make a change. Some are scared of things they don't understand. Some are just very dedicated to spending their investors' money in the United States, no matter how much they lose because of it. And so there's lots of things you're up against, and some companies are very open to it, but they essentially have always already or always have already taken advantage of it, at least to some extent. So you really need to figure out how you're going to do something that's unique and not just copy the norm and come at it with this surprise of, wait, everyone's already done this? Oh no, I thought this was unique. That's really important. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. This is our last video in Texas. We'll be in New York tomorrow in my filming time. So hopefully we'll have videos for you from there, along with information about the flight up. It's getting a little bit chilly, but still super bright. I'm sorry for the harsh light. Not much I can do about it, but I think the GoPro 13 is handling it pretty well. And as always, if you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlanMiller. You can join our channel with the join button down below. You can watch another video. That does a lot to help us out. Tell someone about the show. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see all of you tomorrow.